on organics processing, and Liam will introduce everybody.
I can feel
Over to you, Jenny.
All right, kia ora koutou, here we are again. So, organics, I'll introduce the team and then I'll do a quick intro and then leave it to the team to run through the presentation and then open up through the chair for questions. Okay, so I have Jen Elliott, who's just come back from gallivanting across Scotland. So it's great that she's come back. She's back a day. Yep. 24 hours. Jeffrey Coe, who's been doing some amazing work helping this process through over the last couple of months. Steph Stedman is not here today. She's just coming back from her annual leave as well, but she'll be here for Thursday. In Best Supporting Actor roles, we have behind the table, we have George Feature, who's been helping us do some of the analysis on the work. And we're really lucky to have Jörn Scharzer. Have I got the name? Pronunciation right here. He's the waste, what's your title, Jörn?
Head of Climate.
Thank you. Head of Climate and Waste at Hutt City. So Jörn has also been with the team because we've been doing this in partnership with Hutt City. So he's been super helpful helping us do some of this thinking as well. If we get any really curly questions, then we'll give them to that team behind the table. So just some quick intros. So you've had quite a lot of discussions over the last 4 years, I think, with respect to choices about collection and processing of organic waste. And we've gone through a lot of your past decisions, but they all culminate generally in a move away from a user pays collection service to a rates-based curbside collection service for all eligible residential households in Wellington. You've made those decisions already. So you've made the call to move to that curbside collection, and those decisions are documented in the paper that we've given to you, so you've got them in front of you, okay? The decision, all those decisions were driven by your zero waste strategy, which was adopted in 2023, so you're really giving effect to your zero waste strategy through these decisions, okay? The redesigned collection service, however, is reliant on finding a suitable organics processing option. And that's what today's conversation is about, just the processing piece, not the curbside decisions and all those decisions you've already made. And it's really important that we find an organics processing option that's robust for the long term. We're pretty agnostic on proving technology, but what's really important is we have to be clear on the requirements. We need to get a robust, reliable service in place for the processing of organics to make the overall collection service work. So the decision you'll have in front of you on Thursday is a decision on the best option for the processing of organic material once it's been collected. Just want to really make that clear. Various directions from Council over the last 18 months, and certainly since I've been here trying to get to the bottom of all this. You've directed us in various ways to go and look at various options for processing. There's been regional options looked at, direction to look at a local site just for Wellington City. And so this paper presents a wrap-up of all of the analysis work the team has done to wrap up a number of options to get to a preferred processing option. The team has done the analysis, they've looked at the options, they've thought really carefully about what the best way forward is, and the paper's making a recommendation for you on that. The team will take you through the process they followed, the analysis that they have gone through, but key in our minds to give you assurance that this is the right decision for you to make when you're thinking about it today and on Thursday. There's a few things we've had in our mind to try and cover in the paper that are the assurance points. So first of all, the ability to proceed with or without Hutt City is quite important, and we've covered that in the paper. So you can ask questions or you can read what's in the paper, but we've really covered the fact that we can proceed to a procurement with or without Hutt City, and we're confident that's the case, even though we'd like them to join us. Confidence that we can proceed within the parameters you've set around the broader curbside rates setting. And what we're proposing in the paper is that if you decide to go with the preferred option, we'll proceed with that, but we'll come back to you if it's not within those parameters, because that's pretty important. That was fundamental to your curbside collection service decisions that you've made already. Confidence in the team's analysis. So they've done a really thorough job having a look at the different options. What a do-nothing option entails is pretty important just to get to the bottom of that, to make sure you're really clear if you decide not to go with this option, what that means for your previous decisions on curbside collection. Flex in the procurement process from here, so what that might entail if you do choose to go down the recommended option. We've thought about your confidence that we don't think you need to go for further consultation if you go down the preferred route, and we cover that in the paper, but happy to take questions on that. And we've also covered in the paper the impact on the LTP and the budget, especially given our conversations that we had last week about SMF. So I think I might just stop there. I'll let the team take you through the presentation and give you their thoughts, and then we can open up through you, Chair, for questions. Okay.
Thanks, Jenny. So we'll probably jump through the first couple of slides really quickly because Jenny's covered off most of this. So this one's just noting that we're making a series of decisions over time, and the one that we're here just now talking about is the agreed organics processing approach. So we can whiz past that one if I can get the clicker to work.
Do you want me to click?
That's all right, I think. And yeah, I think the background, you've covered that all off nicely, so we'll skip past that as well. And the aim really is that we'll go through the slides fairly quickly for you, and then have good opportunity for questions at the end.
Can I just ask one question of Ken? So we have nobody online, is that right? With no other councillors are online? Sort of make sure that it...
We have Councillor Calvert and
Oh, okay.
Councillor
I'm online.
Oh, they are. Sorry, I can't see them on my screen. Okay, thanks.
Sounds sick.
So yeah, just in terms of the process we went through in terms of pulling the paper and the business case together. So the aim with this was to provide a robust presentation of the options to you. So we pulled a business case together as a good practice format for you to have the information available around assessing different options. And so that meant extending beyond, I think the resolution was around looking at local and regional options. And so we've just extended that to make sure we've covered off all reasonably practical options, and we've got a good documented approach around looking at the different options around organics processing. Options for organics processing have a relatively complex range of permutations around different variables about technology, location, capacity, delivery model, funding, and so we've tried to have a relatively structured approach to how we've identified the options and laid them out, and arrived at that shortlist. And that's just to help to build clarity of the likely nature of each option and to allow for more meaningful comparisons between the options around what exactly we're talking about. So the assessment mechanism we used around the options, we're looking at both a high-level multi-criteria analysis and some cost modelling. So the approach taken for both of these was contextual to the nature of the decision that you have in front of you. So as Jenny mentioned, this is a decision building on previous decisions of the curbside, and so the nature of the analysis we did was reflective of that. So what this meant is a high-level MCA was undertaken by the project and waste teams to identify if any of the options clearly perform better or worse than alternatives in terms of core criteria around strategic alignment, complexity, risk, affordability. So there was an assessment on that degree. And then secondly, we did a cost modelling exercise, which was done across the shortlisted options to understand the ongoing long-term financial costs to council of the different options. So we built cost models around the operating and capital costs of the options. And this was to inform an affordability assessment. And the affordability assessment was benchmarked against that targeted rate range that you had agreed around organics processing as the key definition of affordability for this service line for the council. And that's the benchmark we've used. So this was an affordability analysis. You wouldn't, a full economic assessment such as a cost-benefit analysis wasn't done as an assessment methodology for the business case. And again, that's given this is an enabling project to support the curbside service changes. So effectively all the different options around processing options have the same benefit profile. They enable the same curbside collection service to be undertaken. And so what the real focus is in terms of the assessment on this methodology, on this is around the relative affordability of the different options and their performance against the affordability benchmarks around the targeted rate range. So that's the nature of the assessment that we've done on that. We'll come to the preferred option now.
Thanks. Okay, so we'll just run through the shortlisted options first of all. So following the assessment of all the potential options, we landed on these 5 for our shortlist. So we included the do nothing option as the base case for comparative purposes, and also a do minimum option. So do nothing, acknowledging that if we don't look to have an organics processing solution, then we wouldn't have the redesigned curbside collection service either. We would need to review that and most likely stay then with the user pays rubbish bag system that we have at the moment. The do minimum option That one involves entering into a service arrangement with an existing processing facility. So that would involve trucking material to an existing facility in the North Island, so further up the North Island. Options 3A and 3B. So 3A is our recommended option. 3A and 3B are versions of the same. So we'll come on and talk about those a wee bit more shortly. Option 4, I'll cover a wee bit about that one. So option 4 is, as per our the instruction to officers in November last year, to look at a local processing solution, and this was to look at establishing organics processing at the Southern landfill to manage the organics generated within the city, and that could potentially also accommodate Hutt City Council volumes. So if you're familiar with the Southern landfill, there's an existing building there, the LAGV building, where we carried out composting indoors previously. So the idea was to look at that and see if we could have that a facility up and running there again, potentially at a lower cost than looking at the regional option. Actually, as we started to look at that, so it was an agitated bed technology that we used there previously, and the industry standard now really is to look at tunnel composting. So as we worked that one through, actually it wasn't coming in as a lower cost option. It had quite high capital costs, and it needed significant volume for viability as well. Clicker. Okay, so coming on then to the recommended option. So option 3A, which is alongside Hutt City Council, enter into a service arrangement with a third party seeking to establish a lower North Island processing facility. So with this option, we can continue the current procurement process that we're partway through. I think, as Jenny alluded to as well, noting that the procurement to date has cast a pretty wide net in terms of potential respondents. We asked for a wide range of respondents and not just gone to market for only a WCC Hutt CC owned response. The procurement to date has been inclusive of service-based options. So where we're at just now, if we go with this recommended option, it's narrowing what was a previously wide procurement process rather than opening it up to a wider set of respondents. What this option would mean is we would be committing to a service arrangement with a private provider who would own and operate the facility. Benefits to that are that it doesn't require the upfront capital investment in the facility, and we would continue with the RFP process and the subsequent negotiations, which would determine the exact nature of those arrangements. Advantages of this option are that it performed well in the cost modelling, it's got lower operational and financial risk, and it aligns with Council's strategic objectives. The disadvantage of this one is that there is that uncertainty until we complete the RFP process. We're slightly uncertain as to what the market responses will be, but that will be removed once we go through that process. With this one as well, so we're recommending option 3A, which is that we continue to work on this alongside Hutt City Council. But it does give us the option that if for some reason Hutt City Council decide not to proceed, we can still continue alone. And noting then that the tonnages that we would commit to a regional plant would make it more likely then that that regional plant would still potentially receive MFE funding.
And just touching briefly on, so these are the two of the charts that have the results of those two analyses I was talking about from the paper or the business case itself. So effectively what they showed was that the MCA was not conclusive in favour of any particular option. They all performed differently, but broadly similarly across different categories. Option 1 and 2 performed worse in terms of strategic outcomes. Option 4, as Jenny noted, financially, from an affordability perspective, was probably the poorer performing option. And option 3, the 3A and 3B, had a relatively higher level of constraints, complexity around the option. The cost affordability, the cost modelling and affordability analysis was more meaningful distinction between the options, which you can see there around option 4 performing at a higher level of operating costs than the others. All do, though, perform within the expected targeted rate range, and all do perform within the LTP capital provision that you have available. So it's not definitive, but it's clearly some perform better. An additional of note, there is an additional option there on the end around scenario 4 that was also modelled. So the base scenario 4 that was modelled around the local option was assumed just processing WCC curbside volumes of organic material. the alternative option there that we had also modelled was around processing an additional volume of material through that facility and achieving revenue as a consequence of that, so achieving some commercial revenue through additional processing and making high use of the capacity that that facility would offer, and that showed that that performed financially better. But I guess the notes there is around the level of financial risk and assumptions that you're making around some of those higher performing cost models is around assumptions around ongoing attraction of commercial volumes of waste and assumptions around the achievement of revenue outcomes on that option. So this is one of the key reasons why those option 3A is the recommended option. Effectively, it performs financially better than the local option in the cost modelling, and with a lower level of financial risk to council and to ratepayers as a consequence of a more straightforward set of assumptions and inputs into the cost modelling.
Could we just move the Teams window so that we can see that bottom right-hand corner? Thanks. Thank you.
I believe both these charts are in the paper, if not the business case.
Okay, so in terms of the key features, or some of the key features of the recommended option, so there's no large capital investment required. Initially, that capital provision was made to maximise the flexibility of the market responses, and noting that MFE funding at that stage was more likely where councils had an ownership stake. I'll talk a wee bit more about it in a minute, but there have been changes to MFE funding which have changed that position. And for that reason, we now are recommending a service-based contract, similar to what some of the other metros have in place, as the most likely and our recommended delivery option. I think we want to be clear that while we'll be purchasing the processing of our curbside volume, which is a relatively small volume, the reality is that the respondents are likely to be of a fairly large scale, as processing the material efficiently and commercially really is about volume. So a provider is likely to be, offering processing at some scale. We're looking at a lower North Island location. I think as well, noting as well that in order to be commercially viable, the large-scale facility needs to be in a central position so that it can access the material coming in, and also it's got ready access to those end markets. And the reality as well being that the nature of our geography means that there really isn't much land available, certainly in the city itself. So processing curbside volumes of organics really is going to entail transport of that material north. I think as well, noting that there's greater likelihood of available land further north. The consenting's more straightforward, and that proximity to the end markets. The consolidation facility, we're going to use, if we're using a facility north of the city, then obviously the material from Wellington has to be transferred from our curbside collection trucks to that processing facility. So the reality of that is that we would have a consolidation facility somewhere where that material is aggregated and transported further on trucks. Ideally, what we'd be looking for is that a supplier would provide that consolidation facility, and I would expect that it would probably be to the north of the city, given that that's on the way to the processing facility most likely. But what we have done is we've allowed some budget for WCC to put a consolidation facility in place within WCC land if that was required, but certainly it's not the preferred option. Okay, so this is what I touched on before. So there have been changes in government policy since the original business case came to council in September 23. So there's been a change in the internal delegations for approving the use of the Waste Minimisation Fund. So while there's still a strong desire to fund organics infrastructure, and particularly regional infrastructure where council has ownership or will be a customer, any funding that exceeds 10 million requires additional approval processes now, beyond that of the Minister for the Environment. So it's unlikely that anything more than 10 million would be approved. Equally, there was an annual pot of 120 million, which has now been reduced to 30 million per year, or until the funds are exhausted. So there is potentially more competition for that money and a lesser chance of securing it. Adjacent to that, the government has decided not to mandate the organics collections, and the zero waste strategy has recently gone from quite a large document to a far more pared back version. So given that there's not that mandate, we are not now forced to have organics collections, but given our own local actions in terms of the zero waste strategy and the WMMP, we would still require to have organics collections and that processing availability if we are looking to meet our own targets. And the final point is just noting that MFE do still want to see organic collections occurring to achieve the targets in the emissions plan, albeit they're not mandating that councils must do it anymore. So basically all of that comes together to impact the affordability of a council ownership model. So as such, our recommended approach now is to move towards the service arrangement so that the capital investment's not required, and we've got less reliance on the MFE funding, given that it's now far less likely than it was. With the timelines, so we will have greater certainty once the RFP responses are received later this year. There's obviously a number of variables in there, including land ownership, resource consenting, various other things. We are still working towards that delivery in 27, 28, obviously dependent on what comes out of the RFP process. But just noting that if we feel then that it can't be delivered within 27, 28, then we would come back to council to seek a further decision. This is just touching on the partnership that we have at the moment. So we're working alongside Hutt City Council. There's a regional procurement governance group. We are recommending that we proceed with that procurement together. And what this means is that basically we'll take forward the regional procurement process. It gives us those economies of scale as we're working through it. But once we get through that process and we have a supplier, then each council would sign independent contracts with the provider. And what that gives, so the RFP will provide for that happening as a joint process, or for Hutt City Council or Wellington City Council to proceed alone. So it does just give us that additional security that if Hutt City Council did decide not to proceed, we can still continue. The impacts on the community, and this is particularly to do with the southern landfill and the local community out towards the south coast. So we have had discussion along the way with the Southern Landfill Community Advisory Group. So that Community Advisory Group was the one that was set up to do with our current landfill extension project. We've kept the CAG group in the loop basically since late 2024, when officers were instructed to explore the local option. I think it's important to note that the CAG and the local community are very much in favour of increased waste minimisation activity at the Southern Landfill site, and more generally in Wellington. They're also supportive of retaining some composting activity on the Southern Landfill site. But where they do have concerns, the main concerns for the community are obviously around increased truck movements, and I know there's lots else going on at the moment that's impacting or potentially impacting that community in terms of truck movements. So yeah, it's those concerns around noise and safety, speed and size of vehicles. So yeah, noting there that although it's not the preferred option, there is still that potential that a consolidation facility could be located at Southern. And what that would mean in practice would be potentially around 10 collection vehicles a week of WCC material coming to site, and 3 to 4 haulage trucks leaving, with the intention being though that those larger haulage trucks would be looking to backfill. So it's trucks that are potentially coming to Wellington anyway, bringing in aggregate, and then we'd be using those to send the organic material out. But yeah, just noting that there are those potential impacts on the community. Yeah. Okay. So risks and contingencies. So it is a procurement where we're seeking a service from a new provider. There is obviously some inherent risk in doing so, given the solution's not already in operation. So, for example, the new supplier failing early. So this is a key factor in the evaluation of respondents in the procurement process. So we'll be looking at the level of certainty and effect of their ability to successfully establish a facility within the expected timeframes. We're looking at proven technology, the ability to secure the required consents. And as part of that process, there'll be a full understanding of the financial strength of any prospective suppliers. So ultimately, though, there is a degree of risk that isn't there with seeking the services from an existing supplier, as in option 2, so potentially trucking it further north, further up the North Island, or with being fully in control through asset ownership. as in option 4 at the Southern Landfill. But obviously those options come with their own inherent risks and costs. So something for you to weigh up. So ultimately, as noted in the paper, if the response from the market doesn't operate within the costs or timeframes that we're expecting, then the SRO will come back to council for further decision making. And equally, if the outcome of the procurement is a level of operational project risk that is too high without an ability to put the appropriate controls in place, then again, the SRO would come back to council for further decisions on that. So this is just noting what our next steps will be. Following approval of the business case, the procurement documents would need to be updated to reflect the preferred commercial model and then more or less ready to release. So they would be released and then we'd evaluate the responses. If the preferred supplier can meet council's requirements, then the contract will be entered into under the delegated authority. As I said, if requirements can't be met, then a further decision will be brought back to council in early 2026, and that could potentially consider or reconsidering the option 4 with a local processing facility. And just to note as well that Hutt City Council will make a decision on whether they're looking to proceed in March 2026.
That's us.
Thank you. Just wanted to flesh out the local community in regard to the traffic movements. Just with that possibility that the consolidation station doesn't need to be at the Southern Landfill, is it possible that we can progress the Kiwi Point Quarry understanding, just so with the idea that we might grow, say if Hutt comes on and later Porirua comes on, are we factoring that forward thinking into how that consolidation could work? So the question is, can we stay open to where that consolidation facility might be, not, and trying to maintain not having it at the Southern Landfill as a first option, as a priority?
Yeah, so through you, Chair, this would be a consideration through the procurement process. So we when we're going through that, we can be quite clear about some of those expectations.
Yep.
Absolutely, yeah. So I think Jen's explained that it's only a last resort that it would be at the Southern Landfill. Our expectation through procurement would be that it would be somewhere north. And I think Jen's explained to me that it would, commercially, bringing even a transfer consolidation station south might not make sense because most of their material will be going north anyway. So, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Councillor Calvert.
Thank you. And I put in a whole range of questions yesterday, but I'll ask some ones that aren't on the list. Jenny, you were very clear right at the start to say we've made decisions that we're proceeding, but we made decisions based on a regional model, which is not really at this stage going ahead. So why were you so adamant that it's almost like, well, we've got to proceed this way?
I'm just going back through, Chair, Councillor, through previous decisions you've made. I might get the team just to have a think about your comment in terms of what those decisions were made on. But you have been clear that you've made a decision to do curbside recycling, and that's clear in your decisions and in your papers, and we've put that into this paper. And you have been clear on your instructions to us, which have been sort out a really robust processing option, and that's what we're bringing back to you today for the decision.
Yeah. I know, but it was based on a regional model. But anyway, we can talk about that later. The other thing was when the subject was last discussed early June, and it was discussed in the context of all the waste projects, we're all looking amber. And that was also the curbside collection, the sludge one as well. Now, you were also going to come back to us this week about staffing continuity risks around the waste projects, but I don't see any briefing or anything like that.
Through you, Chair, I might check on that expectation. I'm not sure we were coming back to you. We did have a conversation at your councillor-only session with EOT about what I've put in place temporarily to staff the waste team while we restructure and get the team back up and running. I can provide you with a really quick update on that now if you like, but I'm about to go through
no.
Yeah.
You know, I thought it was mainly about water that you did, and then we wanted more detail. Because obviously all these waste projects are sort of interlinked as well. And I wonder why we're making a decision on this when we haven't got an update on all the other waste-related projects and make a decision together. Why do we have to do this now?
So through you, Chair, this is, we're bringing this back because you have asked for it.
Yes, I know, but it's also about timing, and also we were keen to understand how.
No, I think Councillor Calvert, I think she's answered your question.
Okay, yeah.
Sorry,
Okay.
Next question is Councillor Winera.
Kia ora. So I guess I'll start with this. So in the business case, I understand there are a number of criteria for selecting whoever this provider is going to be and the preferred option. What I couldn't see is whether some characteristics of the provider would be weighted appropriately, namely stuff about maybe like the ethical procurement that the supplier may have, or perhaps the living wage for this particular supplier's workers, etc., etc. Would those things be a consideration when we are choosing our provider?
So through you, Chair, I might get Andrew just to go a little bit further into this, because this goes into our standard practice around procurement and what's expected. So, Andrew?
Yeah, kia ora. So whenever we work through our procurement processes, we give effect to our procurement policy and also the broader outcomes strategy that is publicly available and has been agreed by the Council. So we would still follow all of those normal processes within this for this particular procurement as well.
Great, superb. I'm just going to be careful about asking this question because I don't want to prejudice any business negotiations that go on, but I mean, who's out there? So we need to find, we're going to need a consolidation facility. We can bang one of those up, but we're going to need a processing facility, and it sounds like when I read this, there's maybe one in mind. So are there a few of those just out there banging around, organic process facilities?
Results of the procurement.
Or are we expecting that one will be put up for us?
Procurement to date, maybe not name names.
My understanding is the procurement is looking for a new provider of an organics processing facility for that would be operating within the region. So I don't think it's an existing provider that we're looking for. There's limited limitations. We're in the middle of a procurement process, so in terms of a probity,
yes,
consider that. But there's a number of we're partway through the procurement process and have a short list of providers as a consequence of earlier stages of procurement.
Okay.
So yes.
So we're basically just hoping that someone will.
There are lots of guys who do this stuff.
Yeah, just through you, Chair. Auckland does run the similar scheme and has a provider. Christchurch has a provider. So there are national providers that do this work.
No, yeah, I understand that. What I'm really asking is, does the facility exist, or are we hoping for one to be created?
Right.
Oh, to be created.
Yes. Okay. Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. That answers the question.
Sorry, thank you.
And just off the back of that, so I understand there was previously an option where we would create our own facility in-house, and that was deemed too expensive based on capital expenditure and the various other capital pressures that we have on us at the moment. How, I guess, can we ensure then, if we're going to contract out instead of doing it in-house, that we can keep costs low over the long term and not be sort of rorted by someone who will have a monopoly over probably what is the only facility in town?
Yes, that's when you have an outsourced service, that's an obvious consideration. And I suppose that the answer there is around the nature of the contracts that get set up with the provider is around managing that risk. So how you set up a long-term contracts and how you get that price certainty is something to work through in negotiations and the establishment of the contract.
And through you, Chair, the waste team is well versed in this. The general waste collections is run through two contracts. Our recycling is run through a separate contract. So this is not a new approach in terms of how we would outsource this kind of function.
Councillor Pennant.
Thanks for the presentation. In terms of the costs of doing nothing, what exactly is included in those costs? Like, would it include, for example, reputation risk if we're sort of the only major city not doing much on organics?
How do we include it in the analysis?
So the cost modelling that we didn't model the costs of the do nothing option. It's quite different to the costs of the other options, which was really around the affordability. Obviously, you don't have the costs of the direct provision of a processing service for the do nothing option. Really, the costs of do nothing is you don't achieve the benefit profile that you're seeking to achieve from the curbside collection changes, which you agreed to as part of the 2024 LTP. There are a range of costs there around, I think, from emissions outcomes, and there was some household affordability analysis in terms of the costs of that to households. I don't think reputational impacts is something that was costed in that original cost-benefit analysis.
It was just an example because there is a financial cost just in terms of needing more landfill or more emissions. Yeah.
Well, definitely more emissions in terms of the option. I think you have made a commitment to do curbside recycling, so it does come back to if you decide not to do any organics processing, you can't proceed with your earlier decision.
And does this preclude the community organic collectors doing their work? How are we going to fit them in?
Do you want to come to that?
I think in terms of the community organics collections that are already underway, there is absolutely still space for those to take place. But opening up the curbside collection just obviously brings it to all of our households and makes it achievable on a large scale that I don't think our community collections that we have, or the community services that we have at the moment can achieve for us.
Okay, and just the last question I had was around risk mitigation. I think you know my concern that this is a very, very large project if we're relying on the lower half of the North Island, and what happens if a lot of councils don't come on board. It wasn't sort of addressed for me in the paper. I know we've discussed it.
Yeah, so I think we have said in the paper that we recommend we can proceed to do this even if Hutt City doesn't come on board. I think the advantages of that is that you are providing the leadership to start a service like this, which will inevitably get the ball rolling and get other people to join in. It also gives the provider the option to access the MFE funding, which is a plus as well. I'm learning on this too, and we're not the only collectors of organic waste. There are other supermarkets that have this as well, so they will all start to come on board potentially if we are providing the catalyst for the service provider.
Councillor Chung.
Great, thanks. I have a few questions. The first one is regarding the subsidy from the government policy. Now, you've stated here in the presentation that we're not likely to receive more than $10 million across all our waste projects. So how much of that subsidy are we actually getting now? Like, are we getting that $10 million maximum?
Maybe works.
Yeah. So the levy, every time waste comes to landfill, the levy is paid on that, and a certain proportion of that comes back to council for us to use on waste minimisation projects. So the 10 million that we mentioned in the presentation is completely separate to that. So we still receive a proportion based on population that comes to us that we use for waste minimisation projects. The 10 million sits with a pot of money that sits with the government, and we would apply to for funding for the waste projects. So for specific projects, like in organics and large infrastructure projects are the sort of things that fund is open for. So it doesn't impact on what we are receiving at the moment for our other waste minimisation projects, but there is less available for these larger scale.
Okay. I don't actually really understand who the government is. Like, we say the government is saying that they're not going to support or they're not going to mandate having organic collection, but the Ministry for the Environment want us to continue with this program. So are they also not the government? So who actually gives the money? Is the Ministry of the Environment or somebody else?
Yeah, so the Ministry for the Environment supports the Minister for the Environment, which is part of Cabinet, which is government. So what government's essentially saying is that they're not mandating this as government policy anymore. What MFE is still saying is they would still like us to do it.
Okay, thanks. Okay, I'm a bit confused about that. Okay, so the second question is, I don't understand why we're discounting option 2. Now, my understanding also is that we do have an organic processing facility nearby, and they told me that they can actually they can increase their processing ability to actually cater for anything that Wellington City Council gives. And so why is it that we would not look at option 2 and continue the user pay system that we actually have now? So then anyone who actually wants to actually send their organic waste out to this plant can actually do it. So then they pay per whatever bin for it, and all the rest of the people who are currently recycling their organic waste in their own compost bins, they can continue doing it the way they are doing it. So wouldn't be the minimum, this would be the least cost to ratepayers, because we maintain that user pay so that those people can actually send it to that other plant. So nothing actually changes there.
So through you, Chair, I think what we might do is just ask Jen quickly to explain the current way it works in terms of collection, which is you've chosen to go for a curbside collection service which will be open to all eligible residents. It currently doesn't work like that. So do you want to just explain how the current collection system works? Yeah.
Okay, so the current collection system is a user pays system for the rubbish collection. So yeah, purchasing yellow bags and putting them out on the street. And then the recycling service is available, well, bins and bags, so depending on properties and what they have available, what they can have, whether they can have a bin or not. And there's a slightly different system within the city as opposed to the suburban system, and there's obviously no organics collection available at the moment. What we're looking to move towards is a more equitable rates-funded system that provides the same standard of service across all our households.
But
that's right. Sorry, Ray, I think you've had your 3 questions and we're running out of time. So, Councillor Abdul Rahman.
Regards to where the place is going to be, given the community concerns about the traffic movement, if you look at currently it's about 150 or more, maybe you might have the figure just going through the Brooklyn Hill. If you add the bus depot that currently the Greater Regional Council is putting on in Ofiro Bay, that is another 80 to 100 buses. What kind of mitigation possibility you have in place when it comes to the traffic movement in these places if you decide to make the place for the waste collection and the landfill?
So through you, Chair, the preference, Councillor, is that the new provider will provide a consolidation service away from the southern landfill. And we consider them more likely to do that from a commercial perspective because they want to consolidate north rather than south and then go north if they have to take it all to a processing plant. That's our preference. If that doesn't happen, then there may be an option for a consolidation facility at the southern landfill, and only at that point will we have to then have a look at what we would do to mitigate any impacts. But it's not our preference. It's our preference to secure a service away from the southern landfill.
So what factors will determine whether it's going to be at the current southern landfill or elsewhere? What kind of factors do you think is going to determine?
So we'll look at that through the procurement process and be expressing our expectations through that process.
So does that mean what is the contingency plan if the supplier doesn't meet the current 100 to 151 costs?
Yeah.
Because the further they go, it's going to be more costs for them. What kind of contingencies do you have in place?
So that was what Jen mentioned, that if we can't procure a service within the parameters you've set us around the rates and around the timing, we will come back to you for a different decision.
Councillor Free.
Okay, so I noticed there's quite a reduction in the proposed CapEx. So I've got a question about the OpEx. Has that gone up because there's a reduction in the CapEx and it's moving to more of a service model, or are you still hoping to deliver the service model in the original amount of CapEx, which was budgeted for?
It's within the same amount of CapEx, and I think in the back of the paper it shows the financial impacts from an operating and capital perspective and how it compares with current provisions in the LTP, and both are well within the provisions of the LTP.
So given that we seem to be moving to a model which is a lot more financially doable, why do you still need to retain the 20 million given that we've got cost pressures emerging in other areas?
Sure. Great question. So through you, Chair, it's just for contingency until we know the outcome of the procurement process.
Yeah.
We're recommending that we get to that before you then decide you might want to do something else with that money. So it's to March. I think when was the procurement? To March next year, we'll know how successful that procurement's been, and at that point we'll be then locking in the service arrangements, and the capital won't be required.
So on that note, the paper introduces itself as we're asked to make a decision on the organics processing solution, but it looks as if actually on the 7th we give you the authority to negotiate the solution with only a couple of parameters, namely the delivery date and the cost, the operating cost. Would it perhaps be in order for us to maybe, if people are minded, to request that you actually do come back to us with the outcome of your RFP so that we can know what we're approving?
That's up to you if that's something you want us to do. We're recommending that to keep things moving, you let us move within those parameters, and we come back to you if we can't meet your expectations.
Yeah, my only concern would be you could start off with that parameter being met, that financial parameter, but maybe a high risk of it increasing, as time goes on, and we would then not know that. Okay, I have got quite a few questions actually, but I'll let someone else have a crack.
Councillor
Put me
Randall.
back on the list, please. Councillor Brown.
Yeah, thank you. This project is really one half of the Zero Waste program, and there's a sort of a recycling bins project that is the other half. And it's like as you said before, this is an enabling project. Why are we being presented with this decision now? We don't know when the bins project, we don't know what is in the bins project business case, and when will we get the bins project business case?
So through you, Chair, we've already answered the first question, which is why it's coming now. You have requested this to come back to you, and it's also your decision is needed on this, so we can meet your timeframe expectations of 27-28 to get this whole thing up and running. If we don't get this decision from you now, we are pushing into those timeframes, and introducing more risks than we really need to have. So that's why the decision is coming to you now, Councillor.
Thank you. In the business case, under the multi-criteria analysis results, I noticed the option 1, which is the status quo, has a cost scoring which is much higher than the other options. And I was wondering why that is, when in fact it's the lowest cost option. It's on page 135 if you're interested in the agenda for the meeting.
May have to come back to you in written questions.
Okay, yeah, okay. And lastly, given that there's I note in the paper it said that a regional facility, if we did it ourselves, would cost something in the order of $70 million. Given now we're going to get a private provider to build essentially one of these, and we're going to make a commitment to use that service, what sort of timeframe commitment are we going to have to make to pay this provider, and how much are we committing to do to commit over that timeframe?
So what's the timeframe of our current waste contracts? Council, we might have to come back to you on that. I think lining it up with our current contracts that we've got as well. I would imagine there'd be a 3 to 5 year timeframe commitment for this, but we'll come back to you on that.
Yeah, I do note that, for example, it says elsewhere that if we're going to get new rubbish trucks, that's a 10-year commitment to the provider there, and I would be surprised if there'll be any less of an amount for a $70 million commitment from a private provider.
So I'm just getting some advice from behind. I think if we are truly entering into a robust solution, which is what we do need to make this work, you're perhaps looking at about a 20-year commitment for a service provider.
Okay, and so at $6 million a year, that's a $60 million commitment?
Over 20 years.
Yes. Sorry, 6 million, that's a $120 million. Thank you. Sorry, my maths.
Maths isn't our strong point.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
I just want to check that the RFP option that is going out is open to all types of processes for organics or FOGO, not just pointing at anaerobic digestion, which is what Auckland and Christchurch have.
Okay.
Yes, it is. The original, so we have a shortlist now, but the original, when it went out originally, it was completely agnostic on the technology. So it was going out with, these are our council requirements, this is what we're looking for, and it was over to the market to deliver on that without specifying AD or composting or anything specific. So yeah, we now have a shortlist, but it's come from that really open pool.
Great. Just the cost variance, because I guess over time the objective would be to increase what people are putting in FOGO. So how will we mitigate the cost variance risk over a 20-year contract, if that's what we might be looking at?
Yeah, I think that goes with any contract, really. I think we'd just be watching the costs and managing the contract over time. So, and we'd obviously have to come back through various annual plan and LTP processes to put money back into those decision-making rounds for you. So I think it's just how we monitor the performance of the contract and what we set up in terms of gateways.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And just in paragraph 3, just the understanding that our whole curbside, you've made it explicit there that the whole curbside collection, the new system, will not proceed if we don't do the organics collection. Can you just explain why that is? Because it was good to hear that last night. Okay, thank you.
Yep, so in the move to the new system, the organics collection is a bit of an enabler in there, and that what we're looking to do is the new system gives us kind of tighter control of the amount of rubbish that residents are putting out. At the moment, they can buy as many yellow bags as they want and put them out on the street. With the move to the new system, then residents would have a bin of a defined size that only goes out fortnightly. So we're starting to encourage behaviour change by bringing in, those kind of restrictions, and by having organics and bigger recycling bins, then it enables them to remove far more from their rubbish to make that possible. If you don't do the organics collection, which would be weekly, then we really can't go to a fortnightly rubbish collection, because then you'd have rubbish sitting there for 2 weeks with the organic material, which is the sort of stuff that starts to smell. So really we need the organics as the enabler for the rest of the system.
Councillor Wadera?
On the list, Chair.
Possibly.
So council has about a 40 sort of 50% market share in waste collection, regular old waste collection. What other providers in the region are already doing organics, if any? This is just a gap in my own understanding. Is there anyone else doing it? Any private wheelie bins?
Yeah, please, yeah.
Just to answer that question, so there are some small-scale providers for food waste collections, and a couple of them are actually operating in Wellington, but we're talking very small scale, and it's on an opt-in basis, so only households that actually want that service. When it comes to green waste, there are private collection providers operating across the cities. In the Lower Hutt area, we do have an optional green waste service that council provides. So there is processing capacity for those, and there's some limited processing capacity for the food waste that's collected through the services. And I understand some of it actually goes to capital compost at Southern Landfill, but there is no large-scale food waste composting or processing available in the region.
Okay, so I guess the reason I ask this is I'm trying to figure out where we are intending to plug into this extant ecosystem. Like, are we intending to take business off these small things? Are we intending to undercut them? Are we intending to be like downward pressure on the whole kind of ecosystem? Like, where do we fit in to these existing services? I understand we're delivering something at a scale slightly different, but I guess I'm wondering, what do we hope will happen to these other services, and where do we fit? Where do we hope to fit?
I think certainly in terms of Wellington City's household organic waste, there's very little happening at the moment, and that there may be a couple of kind of smaller players who are kind of accepting it at local community compost sites, but there's no one who is collecting household organic material at the moment by way of food waste. So there's no one out there that we're kind of impacting in that sense. There is some commercial collections of food waste and from events and from some restaurants and that kind of thing, and that material is collected at the moment by a commercial contractor, but then that material ultimately comes up to the Southern Landfill for processing. There's no intention, we're not looking at providing commercial collections of food waste, so again, no impact on the business who's, the businesses who are providing that service at the
I'm
moment.
not worried about it. Just
Yeah,
because I think
yeah.
it'd be great if we
Yeah.
were at downward pressure, but
yeah,
trying to
and
figure out what the
potentially
landscape
then-
is.
Yep, potentially then, though, if there is another facility, then it opens up options for them in terms of where their material ultimately goes.
Okay, thanks.
Councillor Calvert, can we just keep the questions as brief as possible because we're running out of time? Councillor Calvert.
Yep. Okay, so I'm just trying to work out the cost. So if I work out 75,000 residential rating units at 110, which is a lower figure each, that's $8.2 million a year. And so I just want to clarify how we got to, I think in the first year it operates, it's 7.2 million.
Yes, I believe the number of households that would be receiving the service is lower than the number of rating units, and that's due to limitations, I think, around multi-unit dwellings or the topography of Wellington in terms of it's a smaller subset of the rating units that would be receiving this service, and that's what's been modelled in the cost modelling.
Okay, and so did that apply whether the unit puts any organics out or not?
If a household would be eligible for the service, then the targeted rate would apply whether they make use of the service or not.
And have you heard about the performance of Auckland Council after some time, with what rate they're collecting at?
No.
Because I heard it was around the 25% mark. I don't know whether it's true, but I'd heard.
Okay.
So that would be interesting because it could mean that if it's only 25% of people participating, a lot of money is going to waste.
So yeah, Auckland's is food waste only, and the feedback I'm getting just now is that it's 30 to 35%, and that's the participation.
Okay.
Councillor Abdul Rahman.
Thank you, Chair. Just following up what Councillor Winera was saying previously, what KPIs will be set in service agreement to ensure the suppliers meets both cost and waste diversion targets? Is there a way that they can be audited for performance and compliance as well? And if so, isn't the part of the governing bodies to make that decision? If it's not included in this paper, when that would be? Because it's like, I think this is, as a governing body, we want to make sure to setting the KPI, also looking at the strategy, how we can monitor and how that can be set.
Certainly, as part of setting up the contract, there will be performance expectations and KPIs around the contract, and they'll be monitored and audited to ensure that they're being adhered to. I suppose the governing body's role in engaging with those performance targets is probably indirectly, in terms of you would set performance expectations for our waste services generally, and that activity in our long-term plan and annual plans, and those would indirectly feed through into the contracts we have for services with service providers. It's not normal that the governing body would be involved in setting the specific contract provisions and KPIs for specific contracts.
In that case, like, let's say, how confident are you when it comes to the operational and capacity to mitigate the risk? How confident are you when it comes to the 5,100 ton per year volume? If it goes lower or more, what that means for the for the organization that's operating, and how you set the KPI and monitoring them.
Contract negotiation.
Sorry, do you want to just try?
So when you look at the operational side of it, so you're setting the KPI and you're also setting the strategic direction for it to audit from time to time. But what you're setting to begin with is just over the capacity for what you have already set as a KPI, and how you're going to do that auditing.
So I'm not, sorry, through you, Chair, I'm not entirely sure what you're chasing down. We might need to cover this maybe offline.
Let me put it this way.
We run a lot of contracts, Councillor, through to provide services, and then a lot of them have KPIs and they are audited and they are managed. So I don't see that as any different to how we're running other big collections contracts through the team already. So this is not a new thing that the waste team will be doing.
Okay, let me put it this way.
Councillor Free.
Okay, thank you.
So just to be clear, on Thursday you're asking us to give you the authority to sign a 20-year contract, which we know very little about.
We are asking you to endorse the preferred option, which is to move to procure a service to provide you with an organics processing solution. Yeah.
But without any further feedback to us, we're also giving you the authority, delegated authority to sign it for a 20-year contract.
Within the parameters that you've set in terms of the curbside collections from the rates-based fees and the time frame.
Okay, but no KPIs or anything like that. We won't. Yeah. Anyway, it's making me uncomfortable. Just have to say.
Deputy Mayor Foon.
Yeah, just conscious of how these systems come in, and we do have lots of small local community providers. So what other mechanisms we can put in place to keep working with them to enable them so that we don't shut them out or shut those businesses down, which are also providing a public good in education and food growing and doing the full system. So just looking for assurance for our smaller providers.
Yeah, I think that's something that we're really aware of, and there's been lots of good kind of groundwork done in Wellington already, and lots of, we have good relationships with those smaller providers and have provided funding and other support in the past. We'd absolutely see that continuing. The waste minimisation team at the moment are kind of working through what the next few years look like for them in terms of delivering on the zero waste strategy, and particularly how we work with small local businesses and those other community providers to make sure that we are working alongside and involving them.
Councillor Chung is the last question.
Okay, I'm still getting a bit confused about option 2. It seems to me that, and we were talking about the current suppliers of green waste, the people who pick up the green waste and take it away. Have there been any discussions about what they actually do with that green waste, and do they actually process it into compost? Because I'm guessing that they do. Is that they can also do other organic waste? Can they actually expand their processes to actually take the organic waste? Because it seems to me that would be the most economical way of actually doing this. Because there's going to be a lot of people who don't actually need to use the service, but we're looking at charging them more for it.
Yeah, thank you. Can I just, maybe again, can shed some light on that?
Yep.
Just to confirm, so there are some existing green waste composting facilities, but they're not consented to process food waste. It's quite a different material. So effectively, that's why we're going through this process to procure that facility to process that material. I mean, it is possible that one of those providers will come through that procurement process and then look to upgrade their existing facility, but it is different to what's currently in place.
Okay, but it seems that would be the logical place to go to, wouldn't it?
Well, not necessarily, because it may be that other options are more cost effective and have a longer term, a better outcome.
Okay, I'll look into that myself.
Thank you very much. That's the end of the session. No, that's it. We're time up. Thank you very much. That was great. It was very useful. Everyone's at liberty to ask any private questions until they escape the room. Thanks.